let's talk about biology, all right? Introduction to biology. A little joke on here. Different generations, right? You have this, that's right, bro. Our ancestors had buttons. Over here, that's right. Our ancestors had cords, right? I'm going way back. Things have changed. Things have changed. Things have what we call evolved, and that's what we're going to get into now. So evolution, all right? Father of evolution is this guy up here, Darwin. Believe it or not, I mean, this is a typical picture of Darwin. You've probably seen little cartoons and stuff with a beard, but I've also seen typical pictures of Darwin looking like this. And it's the same person, believe it or not. So Darwin is the author of a book back in 1859, The Origins of Species, where he went to the Galapagos Islands and he looked at certain kinds of finches, which is a type of bird over there. There's 14 different species there. He made a couple points when he observed all this stuff. There's something called the descent of modification, where all the species of finches came from one. So somehow that one mother finch, over the centuries and eons, changed, the beaks have changed and so forth. It all came from one. He also came up with this theory called natural selection, where your body or your certain species has adapted to certain things. Certain beaks on these birds, maybe they had to have a very pointy beak because that's where the good worms are in a tree. So they have to get a very pointy beak to do that. But they had other finches that had beaks that were curved, and they weren't so good to go into those, to get those worms or whatever animals that are in the trees. So because of that, the birds with the curved beaks will probably die off because they can't get the worms that the birds with the pointy beaks could. So we call that natural selection. Their bodies have adapted with these pointy beaks. Okay? So we have this thing that we call evolution. All right? It's a process of change that has transferred life on Earth. But you will never, ever, ever, ever see evolution happen in your lifetime. This happens over not even centuries. We're talking about thousands and thousands of years. You know, our bodies have changed from what it was when we were cavemen. And believe it or not, our bodies will change, adapt to whatever new things are happening on the earth or whatever we're changing to. I believe that our eyes will probably be much, much bigger, let's say 5,000 years from now, than what they are now. Because it looks like these smartphones are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and our eyes have to soon adapt to that small things, so our eyes will get bigger and bigger and bigger. All right? So that's why you will never see it in your lifetime, but things do change. It occurs over centuries, millenniums, and so forth. So the easiest way we could explain give you an example of the natural selection is the largest, or not largest, but the tallest animal we have on Earth, the giraffes. Giraffes, some of them, when we're talking about eons ago, some of them had short necks, some of them had long necks. But the giraffes that had short necks would be able to eat the low-lying cherries or leaves that are down here. But they're going to be competing with all the horses and zebras that are about the same tallness. So the ones that had the longer necks were able to reach up here to get those leaves that they wouldn't have to compete with all the other animals. So lo and behold, after eons and eons of times, these giraffes over here died off because they competed with too many other animals. These were the ones that were able to survive because they're not competing with other animals to get those leaves. Natural selection. Again, it doesn't happen in your lifetime. It happens in thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Okay? So you can understand this comical cartoon a little bit, right? Great moments in evolution. These baseball players here, somehow they got to get that ball, right? Okay. So what is a living thing? Biology is the study of life. We do that in scientific methods. We'll learn about that later. So biologists have to ask questions such as, how does a single cell develop into an organism? How do you have a sperm and an egg that unite, and that one cell becomes this? How does the human mind work? Think about that. Woo! For some reason, you find that comical, right? The thought of me just going like this. Some of you found it funny. Some of you just think like, I am going to withdraw. But the idea of making a thought and then remembering that a week or a month, or help you a year later. I mean, how does that get stored in your brain? It's just one cell telling another cell what to do, neurons, nerve cells. But how does that item, that issue, that thing become a thought? Because if it's somehow stored in your brain and you remember that even 10 years from now, then even when you die, like Einstein when he's dead, it's still stored in the brain. Where? How is it thought? Very interesting. How do living things interact in communities? Right? You go up to a squirrel, the squirrel runs away. It's not going to just come up to you, but a dog can come up to you. Why? So we've got to figure out differences between these two items. And we're going to get pretty basic. The difference between a frog. Has anyone seen this? Yeah, this is over in Plymouth, right? Yeah, this is the rock. This is supposedly the area where the pilgrims landed, right? Yeah, that's what that is. So the difference between a living thing and a non-living thing. We have 6 different things that make something living. Metabolism, responsiveness, movement, growth, differentiation, and reproduction. Pretty straightforward stuff. I'm just going to go over very quickly about these things. Metabolism. It's a sum of all the chemical reactions that happen in your body. We either build things or we break things up. So catabolism, like catastrophe, is breaking things up. Whereas anabolism, like anabolic steroids, are building things. So think of it like a Lego set, right? We either take this building over here and break it up, that's catabolism. Or we take these pieces here and build a building, that's anabolism, right? We either build things or break things up, right? You eat food. You eat that hamburger. It's a solid thing. It's got to break down into smaller things, digest. But then we've got to take all that and build up it so that we can build muscles or skin or whatever we got to do. Responsiveness. So it needs to, not micro might be that one. Yeah. So responsiveness, the ability of your body to detect certain things and respond to it. You saw someone just walking here. You responded to it. You all looked at me, right? Decrease in body temperature, right? It gets really cold out here, your body temperature wants to come down, or you get an infection, your body temperature goes back up. Responsiveness, movement, motion of the body, right? Obviously, it's pretty straightforward, all right? You got to move from one place to another. Think of the rock and the frog, the differences between the two. A rock isn't going to be able to do this, right? Growth, right? Growth is going to, body change is pretty straightforward. Rocks aren't going to really do that. Differentiation. Might be a little bit new to you, but you see it, you know what it is. Differentiation is the development of a cell from an unspecialized cell to a more specialized cell. If you have, and we're talking about more like stem cells, right? A stem cell could actually make different cells. So you have a sperm and an egg, they unite together, now you got one cell. That one cell is a stem cell. And it multiplies and multiplies. Eventually it's going to make muscle cells. It's getting more specific. It gets even more specific. Is it going to be a heart muscle cell or is it going to be a skeletal muscle cell? See, it gets more specific. We don't go the other way. We don't go specialized to unspecialized. You're going from unspecialized to specialized. Cells have specialized structures and functions that differ from their precursor cells. They're more specific. All right? Stem cells give rise to cells that undergo differentiation. Differentiation is a more specialized cell. Something becomes more differentiated, becomes more specialized. Something that's undifferentiated is an unspecialized cell. Something that's fully differentiated is a specialized cell. You'll hear these words quite often in your studies. Okay, so we go from a stem cell that's unspecialized into something that becomes more specific. And of course, able to reproduce, right? Rocks don't do that. All right, so those are the 6 different things that make the difference between a living thing and a non-living thing. Now let's look at levels of biological organization. A hierarchy. Okay? So we start off as chemicals. Atoms, molecules. And that's why, starting tomorrow, we're going to get into chemistry. That's the reason why we get into chemistry, is because it is the basis of living things. You need to know how atoms and molecules work for you to understand how biology works. So we got to spend about 1/3 of the course talking about chemistry. Then we get into cells, cytology. All those molecules, when they come together, they can make cells. So we call it cytology. And again, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about cytology, okay, the cells. Then the cells, when they come together, now they're called tissues. Now, we won't get into that because tissues is where we will begin talking in anatomy and physiology if you're going that route. Okay? When you put different tissues together, now that's an organ, like a stomach or a urinary bladder. If you put many different organs together, now you've got a system. A stomach and a large intestine, small intestines, rectum, mouth, pharynx, and so forth will make the digestive system. And when you put all systems together, then you're going to get an organism. So this is a very typical picture, putting it all together. You got atoms going to molecules, to cells. You have a lot of cells together, now you've got tissue. A lot of different tissues together, which I was trying to show you over here, will make an organ. Many different organs, like a kidney, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, makes the urinary system. When you put the urinary system with the digestive system, the nervous system, cardiovascular system, then you're going to get a cute little pebbles over here. Okay? But we could go further than that, and that's what biology wants to go into, is that after we got the organism, then we have many organisms together, we have a population. That's all the organisms of one species living within the bounds of a specific area. People, right? Squirrels, separately. Then we have a community. And that's when you have humans, squirrels, birds, rabbits, all in the same community, how they all go together. But I know I'm just talking about animals, but keep in mind, you also have the plants in there too. The ecosystem is all living and non-living things in a particular area, including items that interact with life, things that go in the soil. You don't want to have radon in your soil, you're breathing that in, right? You also have to deal with atmospheric gases, light, soil, water, and so forth. You have a river going through this campus over here, but you got to deal with that. How are you going to deal with that? And then we have a biosphere. It's all the places on Earth where life exists. Okay? So again, we went from molecules, or atoms to molecules to cells to tissues to organ systems to organism. That's what we saw with pebbles over there. And further, we got the population, the community, the ecosystem, and finally the biosphere. Okay? Questions on that? Pretty straightforward, right? This chapter is not too bad. Okay? Also, I just want to make a point, too, that all my PowerPoints are my PowerPoints. I'm not saying don't share them. I'm saying you're not going to find them anywhere else. This is not the PowerPoint of the book. This is not the PowerPoint of someone else. I've created this because this picture might not be in your book. I found other pictures in other books to make points of certain things. All the wording is coming out of my mouth for the most part. All right? So I kind of created for each one of these things examples. You're not going to find them anywhere else. Share them. I'm happy with that. But I just want to let you know they're not from the book. Okay? Some pictures you'll see from the book, but not everything. All right, so let's talk about homeostasis. Okay? Our body hates change. Absolutely hates it. And it needs to adapt so that we can be in what we call homeostasis or an equilibrium. It keeps us steady and in a balanced state. We don't want our temperature to go up too high because it's going to start breaking up all our enzymes that make all our chemical reactions to do what it's supposed to do. Well, those little things break up and then you're going to be sick. That's why you're sick when you have a high temperature. And it involves body fluids, temperature, metabolism, a bunch of other factors. So we have these things that we call gradients. The gradient is a difference in quality and concentration of physical value when we compare it to two different areas. Substances that naturally move from a high concentration to a low concentration. It naturally wants to go that way. For instance, if I take this eraser, the gradient, the natural gradient, and when I let go of it, is that it's going to go down, because that's the law of gravity. Right? If I want to go against the gradient, then this will be floating straight up. That's how magicians work. They learn the laws of physics and then they break them. Okay? So that's a natural gradient. Going against the gradient is doing something that's not natural. Yeah.
Would that be considered like when you put like oil in the water? It's usually
correct. You mix it up and then it wants to be separated. Right? Oil and vinegar, right? Is it natural? And we'll talk about why that happens when we get into chemistry. Okay? So it naturally wants to do that. If we have 100 people in this room here and there's 2 people out there, and I open up the doors, which way do the people want to go? Naturally. Out the door or in the door? I mean, out the room or in the room? If there's 100 here and 2 out there.
Out.
Yeah, it wants to go out. It goes from a high concentration to a low concentration, right? That's what that is. Until you get 50 people here and 50 people there, then it's equal. Okay? So we have types of altitude. or I'm sorry, we have types, we have altitude that could be described this way, temperature, pressure, inside or outside cells, we'll talk about those as we go along, certain chemical things, we'll get into cell membranes. So these are some examples, right? First, we're going to go from a high altitude to a low, that's the gradient it's going to go, an altitude gradient. Think of this as your blood vessel. And inside, you have blood cells, and you have a blood pressure. That blood pressure is very high compared to outside. If that blood vessel gets cut, it's going to go from a high pressure to a low pressure. That's why you bleed. Okay? Or we can talk about, like we talked about with the room here, we could have, if this is a cell wall, we could have 50 green balls there and 4 green balls here. The gradient goes from a high concentration to a low. Right? That's where the gradient is. It's not natural to go from a low concentration to a high. We can do that, but we're going to need special things to do that. And we'll talk about that when we get into the cell membrane. So we have to control homeostasis because it's always changing. Right now, we have a certain temperature in this room. We have body heat that gives off here. We have the air conditioners that are blowing things over here. But even if we have an extra person coming in here right now, that's adding more body heat here. Now, it's so minuscule that you probably wouldn't even recognize it, but the room recognizes it, that it's going to get a little bit hotter in here. So that's going to make, we got to keep this temperature in this room, let's say 70. Well, a person coming in here makes it 71. So now the air conditioner is going to kick on, and it's going to blow some cold air in here to get it back to 70. Our bodies do the same thing here, too. Certain glucose levels, or sugar levels, should be like 100. You eat a sandwich, now it goes up to like 200. Not good. We got to bring it back down. So we have a system in our body called the endocrine system that is going to get that back to normal. But our bodies are always changing. We have physical insults, whether we have intense heat or lack of oxygen. Hold your breath, right? We also have changes in the internal environment. Like I said, if your sugar goes down in your bloodstream, it's because maybe you have a lack of food that you're not eating. The physiological stress, just taking this course. You got to now divide your time and how to prioritize things. Any disruptions, mild and temporary, your body will adjust good. But if you have intense or prolonged things like poisoning or severe infections, your body just can't do it. It needs some help from the medical aspect, whether a certain pill or put, you're going to have to do something like IV fluids or something like that. Your body's always changing. So we have to deal with feedback. You have cycles of events going on. Organisms, bodies, or your body is monitoring whether things inside your body or outside the body. Your body's always monitoring what's going on, and it's re-monitoring to see what's going on so that we have to adjust that. Now, you don't have to think about that. Your body does it automatically. So we have 3 basic components. There's a receptor, whether it's a skin receptor for temperature. It receives input into your body, and then it sends that information to the control center, i.e. your brain. Your brain is going to figure out, okay, that's a hot thing over there, we got to do something. Or maybe it's a pain receptor. Maybe there's a needle that goes in your arm. The needle goes in here, sends a message to the brain. The brain is going to, at the control center, interpret what that is. Oh, that's a needle going in there. It's going to be very painful. It's going to make you say, ow, and it's going to make you flinch. How? Because it's going to send information to the effector organs, to your muscles of your mouth to say, ow, and the muscles in your arm to move it away. So that's a very simplistic thing where we're going to take a receptor and you can do this on your own. You got a receptor, control center, and an effector, and you have this teeter-totter going on. Okay? Like the temperature of this room, a teeter-totter. It's supposed to be 70 degrees. If it becomes 80, the air conditioner goes on. If it becomes 50, the heat goes on, right? You've got this thermostat in your body. So you can do this on your own, whether you get cold and why you shiver, or you get hot and why you sweat. Okay? So homeostasis, we have values of variables that fluctuate around a set point. For instance, our body temperature should be 98.6. That's the set point. But if it's 99.2, that's still normal. If it's 97.8, that's still normal. You have these range of values that we can go around, and it's fine. If the temperature of the room is supposed to be 70 and 71, that's still okay. 69 is still okay, right? It's fluctuating. But it gets to a point when it gets too far off. So the set point is the desired value, right? For body temperature, it's 90.6. So we have two mechanisms to get our body back to normal. There's something called negative feedback. Negative feedback is, let's say your blood sugar should be 100, a level 100 units. And your sugar goes up to, let's say, 110. Then it goes to 120. Negative feedback is saying, well, we get up to 120, that's not normal. We need to bring it back to normal. This is what we call negative feedback, to bring that back to normal. You're not making this number bigger and bigger, making the distance from the normal, the set point to where it is now. You're not making that bigger. You're making it smaller. That's what I'm saying up there, is that the point is made smaller, returning it to normalcy. This is the most common type of feedback that we have in our body, negative feedback. Likewise, if it goes down to, let's say, 90, and then it goes down to 80, that's not good either, and there's something that's going to bring it back. We still call this negative feedback because it's making that distance smaller, bringing it back to normal. But we also have something called positive feedback. Positive feedback is that these numbers are getting larger. Maybe it goes to 120, then it goes to 180, then it goes to 240. It's getting bigger. The arrow's going this way. It's becoming a greater distance. See that? And it's getting greater and greater. Likewise, if it goes down to, let's say, 80, and then it goes down to 60, then it goes down to 40, you're getting it worse and worse and worse. This is what we call positive feedback. And this doesn't happen often in our body. In most cases, when you have positive feedback, there's a disease process going on in your body. If your sugar is going higher and higher and higher, you may have diabetes. There's something that's causing it to go higher, because now your body can't even function when it's 500. So we don't see positive feedback normally in our body. There is a few instances, and I'll give you an example where it is normal, but it's more in the reproductive system, and it's beyond the scope of this course. It's more when we get into anatomy and physiology part 2. But let me give you an example of positive feedback that is normal. It's pretty easy to manage. A woman is giving birth. Okay, so the cervix, which is the opening to the womb, is closed. That's the set point. Normal, it's supposed to be closed. Okay? But now, baby wants to come out. So that cervix is going to open like a doorway. Not that big, but it goes down. I'm exaggerating, okay? It opens. Okay? Now it's going away from the normal. Normal's supposed to be closed. Now it's opening to allow a baby to come through. Sends a message to the brain saying, oh, baby's trying to go through. No problem. I'll give you more pain. And makes it even further and further. It goes further and further and further, allowing the baby to come out. That's positive feedback, but that's a normal thing for labor. Does that make sense? Okay? So there is other things when we deal with hormones where it's normal, but it's way over the scope of this course to explain with estrogen and progesterone, so I won't go into that. But most cases of positive feedback is a disease process going on. All right? Negative feedback is mostly what's happening in your body.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I'm 100, if it keeps going down, there's still positive feedback?
If it goes further, because you're making where it is now, let's say it's 40, and now and the set point is 100, you're making it larger, the distance between what normal is to where you are. So if you're making it larger and larger, it's not trying to go back to 100.
Going down?
It's larger. The distance between here. See, it went from 100 to 80, and now look, 100 to 60. See how large it's getting? It's getting larger. See how my arm is going larger? Whether it's going up or down, the distance is getting larger.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Not the numbers, the distance. You're going further away from what normal is. Either way. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Wouldn't, like, drinking alcohol and stuff be a positive feedback?
Explain to me how.
Because they say when you drink, like, the alcohol content is what makes your levels in your bloodstream and stuff get farther from normal, which causes you to get drunk. And the more you drink, the higher up.
Well, that's positive feedback.
That's what I said.
Oh, yeah, it is positive. Yep, it's positive. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's positive feedback because you're not the alcohol, but what's happening is that the blood is getting thinner and causing other things. It causes dilation. That's why a lot of people who were alcoholics, they have like that reddish flush on their face because their blood vessels dilate and getting closer to the top of the skin, so it appears as though blood is there. It appears very and it bursts. So yeah, that's positive feedback. But again, that's a disease process. Right? Does that make sense? So most cases of most cases of positive feedback is disease processes happening. Negative feedback is not disease. That's what we want to do. Right? Your thermostat is really doing negative feedback. Gets it back to like normal is or whatever you set. Okay? Other questions? Big concept on that. Important concept. Okay. So this is just showing you negative feedback in a sense of, the thermostat. And then positive feedback with childbirth, and you can do that on your own. A lot of these things I kind of breeze right through because they are straightforward. Just follow the steps 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just what I explained with the baby coming out. Okay?
In this lecture, we're going to talk about homeostasis and all of the mechanisms that help the body maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is the process of maintaining a stable internal environment. There are 3 parts within the human body that help maintain homeostasis. The first part is a receptor. The second is the control center, and the third is an effector. Using the illustration, let's take a look at how homeostasis is maintained. A variable is a condition that can be changed or regulated, such as temperature. If you notice, the variable is on a level board. This leveled board represents ideal normal values called a set point. Any changes away from the set point is called a deviation or an imbalance. So when a deviation occurs and a variable is no longer in homeostasis, the body will activate mechanisms that will oppose the deviation to return the body back to homeostasis. So let's take a closer look at homeostasis in action. First, a stimulus produces change in the variable causing an imbalance. Second, a receptor detects the change. Third, the receptor sends information to the control center. Fourth, the control center sends signals to activate an effector. And finally, the response by the effector counters the imbalance produced by the initial stimulus to return the variable back to homeostasis. There are two mechanisms which help maintain homeostasis. The first mechanism is a negative feedback mechanism. The second is a positive feedback mechanism. A negative feedback mechanism is a mechanism that opposes a deviation from the set point. It is the most common regulation mechanism to help maintain homeostasis. Below is the negative feedback mechanism for body temperature. In this illustration, 98.6 represents the set point. A deviation occurs when the body temperature rises. Temperature receptors in the skin detect the rise in the temperature. These temperature receptors then send the information to the hypothalamus in the brain. Next, the brain sends signals to activate sweat glands, which causes them to produce sweat, which cools the body and lowers the body's temperature. Sweating opposes the initial rise in body temperature. Let's take a look what happens when the body gets cold. So when body temperature decreases, again, temperature receptors in the skin detect the decrease in temperature. These receptors send information to the hypothalamus in the brain. The brain then sends signals to activate skeletal muscles. The actions of the skeletal muscles will produce shivering, which warms the body and raises the body's temperature. Shivering warms the body, which opposes the initial decrease in body temperature. And the last feedback mechanism that helps maintain homeostasis is positive feedback. Positive feedback mechanism is a mechanism that responds to the deviation by making the deviation greater. Positive feedback mechanisms are rare regulatory mechanisms. Childbirth is an example of a positive feedback mechanism. During childbirth, the head of the baby pushes against the cervix. Nerve impulses from the cervix are transmitted to the brain. Then the brain stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin is carried by the bloodstream to the uterus. Oxytocin stimulates the uterus to contract, which pushes the baby towards the cervix. In essence, the baby's head pushing against the cervix results in the uterus contracting even harder.
So homeostatic imbalances, moderate imbalances, you can recognize certain things, certain signs and symptoms. Those signs and symptoms are good. Pain is a good thing. You stubbed your toe, it's infected, you have pain there. That's a good thing, because that tells you that you need to look at it and decide, should I go get medical attention or not? For someone who's a diabetic who doesn't have feeling in their toe, and they step on a piece of glass, gets infected, they don't feel the pain. So they're not going to really go get medical attention. It looks bad, but it doesn't hurt, so it's fine. Not a good thing, and then they get their foot amputated. So moderate imbalances, you get these signs and symptoms. And the difference between a sign and a symptom, a sign is an objective change, like a fever, a swelling, a rash. It's measurable. It could be elicited by someone else, as opposed to a symptom which is subjective. I feel warm. I have pain. I have a headache. You can't measure that. That's what the patient tells you. But a sign, you have a fever because I just took your temperature, it's 104. But I'm also warm too. Good. He has a sign of a fever and he has a symptom of being feverish, right? See the difference between the two, okay? Severe imbalances just will cause death. Your body just can't adjust, boom, you just die.